spells and wintry showers further north. That stays similar over the next few days, temperatures remaining below average. See you again soon.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome to Gloria Meets. First up, it's MP Neil Coyle on a year without alcohol.
At the point I made the decision to stop, I didn't really feel I had a decision about stopping, frankly, because it was out of control.
Shadow Cabinet Minister Preet Kaur Gill.
I could not believe that this person used their place of work email to actually make that threat.
He's been in Parliament for over 3 decades. Labour MP Clive Betts.
And I remember a police superintendent coming to me, knew me and said, there's over 60 people died. And you think, I've just seen that.
All that after your news.
Good evening. At 6 o'clock, I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, wanted to, quote, frighten the pants off everyone to ensure public compliance with constantly changing COVID rules. The latest leaked WhatsApp messages in the Sunday Telegraph show Mr Hancock and his team discussing how to utilise fear and guilt to make people obey lockdown, including using a new strain of the virus to scare the public. Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says Mr Hancock's political career is over.
I think the key thing is that he accounts for himself in front of an inquiry. It comes back to this point, doesn't it? Why we need this inquiry to take place quickly. A lot of people lost their lives. There's a lot of people who think that the way in which lockdowns operated has had long-term implications on all kinds of fronts. Everybody wants an inquiry because everybody wants to be able to see the evidence, to be able to debate it properly and calmly, and it's why we need to get on with it.
Leaked conversation with Mr Hancock, the UK's top civil servant, described Boris Johnson as a nationally distrusted figure he feared would be ignored by the public if the then Prime Minister introduced new lockdown rules. Simon Case was appointed Cabinet Secretary by Boris Johnson in September 2020. A spokesperson for Mr Johnson's declined to comment. Some rail passengers' season tickets have gone up by hundreds of pounds today in the largest increase in train fares for more than a decade. Ticket prices across England and Wales are rising by an average 5.9%, despite strikes and cancellations. The Rail Minister, Hugh Merriman, says the increase is below inflation. Labour has described it as savage. Next week's remaining ambulance strikes in England have been called off. The Unite union, which represents 3,000 workers, has entered pay talks with the government. Unite has joined Unison and GMB, unions which say there has been a huge shift in the government's position. The strikes were to take place tomorrow and Wednesday. 2 men arrested following the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland have been released. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot several times in Omagh last month and remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. 6 other men, arrested and questioned as part of the investigation, have previously been released. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have received an official invitation to King Charles' coronation. A spokesperson for Meghan and Harry told The Times a decision on their attendance, though, would not be disclosed at the present time. The announcement follows Prince Harry's recent interview with a trauma expert, where he said he always felt different to the rest of his family, just like his mother, Princess Diana. The coronation will take place on the 6th of May. TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. And more news coming up at the top of the next hour.
Neil Coyle, on the 1st of March, you reach an incredible milestone. You will have not had an alcoholic drink for a year. How does that feel?
It's good. No alcoholic drink, but no hangovers for a year. And for the first year since my early teens, I think, without a drink, which is, you know, looking back, is an indication of a broader problem. But no, it feels good. I feel more energetic. I've saved money. I've saved time. I've lost weight. You know, I feel physically better. So it's been a positive step in what's been a difficult year.
At your worst, how much were you drinking a week?
So at the point I made the decision to stop, I didn't really feel I had a decision about stopping, frankly, because it was out of control. It was over 200 units a week. And I wasn't drinking every night, so it gives an idea. And I was never a day drinker, anything like that. And for me, it was almost entirely beer and wine. So that's, you know, do the maths. It's a lot of units. It's a lot of beer every evening, most evenings a week.
They say that people with a drink problem only stop when they hit rock bottom. What was your rock bottom?
Well, getting myself in trouble, and I accept that it was, you know, I am responsible for the position I got myself into.
Just remind people about that.
So there were complaints about my behaviour and language towards others in the parliamentary estate, and I'm very sorry for the you know, inappropriate language and behaviour. You know, that shouldn't have happened. I was suspended by the Labour Party, and you know, but I'd made the decision to stop before there was a suspension or formal complaints were made. Actually, when I heard there was a concern, I sought to apologise, and I made the decision to stop drinking at that point because I knew I wasn't in control, and I knew the only way for me was to stop altogether. And initially, you know, my thinking was I need to stop for a period. I didn't think, even then, I wasn't thinking I need to do this full stop. I felt at that point, if I could get to Christmas, that would have been a pretty solid achievement. The longer I've done this, the easier it is to realise that drinking has been a problem for a longer time in my life, and also that the only way to keep myself safer and healthier is to stop altogether permanently.
So just to remind people, you were suspended from the Labour Party for an incident involving a British journalist who has a Chinese mum over some racist remarks that you made in the bar. Is that accurate?
It's British Chinese, and I accept I use inappropriate language. It's, you know, and I remain very sorry. And you know, it's a horrible situation to be in. I left, you know, somebody left a conversation with me feeling upset and offended by what I'd said, and there's just no excuse to be in that position. I shouldn't have allowed that to happen, and I should have been clearer that I was very sorry at the time. I tried to apologise in the evening, and it wasn't believed that it was sincere, and that's, you know, I have to take that on the chin, and I hope that my actions and repeat apology over the last 12 months is seen as sincere, and we can move forward.
As a result of that incident, you were banned from the bars on the parliamentary estate?
So yeah, I got a letter from the sergeant, I'm saying six of the watering holes in Westminster. That isn't all of them, and because I'd made the decision that I wanted to stop and I needed as much support as possible in achieving that, and I was worried. From the start, I didn't believe I would be able to do this. The dependency was strong. I was drinking a ridiculous quantity that was very harmful to my health. So I asked for all of the. So there's one called the Smoking Room, which is a bar.
That was my favourite one. Only MPs.
I didn't want to say that, but you've outed yourself. But you know, that wasn't on the list because that under the parliamentary classifications that counts as a cafe. Okay, I think that'd be news to people drinking there. But you know, I asked for it to be all venues and for a strong enough period to give me the best chance of not. Breaking my abstinence, and you know, the ban passed in August. I'm allowed in. Everyone I've been back in, they have 0% bottles, and I'm keen that they get a 0% on the pump.
Do you think there is any indications?
I think we're going to win that. Yeah, it's a campaign to. It's underway.
Do you think there should be as many bars on the estate, or actually? Well, actually.
I think it's a legitimate question. I'm not in the first ever Labour MP for Bermondsey did campaign for no bars in Parliament. I'm not in that mindset. I think actually the social side of networking is really useful, and the vast majority of people don't have that predisposition to drink too much. That inability to stop drinking doesn't affect everyone, and it's just those who, like myself, have that predisposition who end up in an unhealthy situation. So I wouldn't say that they need to be stopped. And then of course you'd end up, well, there are restaurants as well. And if you want MPs to stay late for votes, then there need to be food outlets and other places. So I'm hoping that I'll be back in the Labour Party soon. I don't think I'd be making any friends of other colleagues if I started calling for all the bars to be shut down in Parliament.
Why should the Labour Party have you back?
Well, look, I won a seat for the Labour Party, and my track record actually is representing an incredibly diverse constituency, and I think doing it well. The response from constituency organisations when the news broke and allegations were made, I had the Somali group, I had the Afghan group, I had an
I bet Jeremy Corbyn could say all these things.
I'm sure he could. The difference between us is he's never apologised. So, I'm horrified that I left someone upset, not least because, I have Chinese family. I lived in China for 2 years. I should have known better. And it's painful. It's deeply humiliating that I didn't know that I was using a term that my Chinese family might use, but I shouldn't, and I can't. And I know that now, and it's that's a very steep learning curve. But, the track record I have in my constituency is bringing forward delegates within our CLP, but also as councillors. There's the first ever hijab-wearing Muslim woman councillor in Southwark. is someone I signed up to the Labour Party. I've tried throughout my work in the constituency to bring forward more diverse candidates, and I have it in my agenda now to make sure we get more British Chinese representation in the Labour Party. We have in my constituency at the Elephant, we have Chinese students and we have a lot of Hong Kong expats moving to this country because of what's happening in their country.
So if Neil Coyle is readmitted to the Labour Party, he can guarantee you will not bring the Labour Party into disrepute again.
100%.
Right, let's go back to alcohol.
Well, I'm hoping not to.
Good point. So let's have a look at how you have done it. Do you go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings?
So the first thing for me was professional support to stop, because I couldn't have done it without medical help, and that included, seeing a doctor, but also medication to, I think it's called Librium, for a fixed period where you float above everything really. That, and then there were other things, I can't remember the name of it, to stop cravings and deal with the side effects of stopping. So medication was actually a really important part of this, and I couldn't have done it without that support. So that was, because that initial period is very much the hardest. And of course, it's where most people who try to stop fail, because they don't have all of that support and you need it in place. And I was the initial assessment in Westminster was I didn't qualify for help to stop drinking.
What assessment, by who?
So there's you go through a workplace assessment. There's a support service for
the House of Commons one.
Yep, for MPs and staff. Employee assistance program is the support, but and it's. I can laugh about it now, but they said because of the unresolved childhood trauma, they wouldn't treat me for the alcohol addiction until I dealt with that. And it's like, well. It was incredibly awkward and it was only because then everything became public, I think, that things changed. So that initial private assessment was done and support was refused, and then coming forward and everything being more public was like, okay, we're going to have to do this. And then, yes, I've had lots of, I have to say, one of the reasons I was really terrified is a fair word, I think, in this sense. I was petrified of what I was giving up. I felt I was giving up part of myself. I felt I was giving up a lifestyle and something that was integral to me. And I thought I would lose a lot through that. And actually, family, friends, and others who've come forward. One of my best mates, who I didn't want to tell I was stopping, he stopped with me. And the network of support is colossal. But yes, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't think I'm meant to say that. I attend as one of the rules. I'm probably breaking a rule there. I'll get thrown out of that. But the fellowship is incredible. The tips, the practical support in how to avoid scenarios and not end up with situations where drink support or given to you that you don't really want around you. And I've had this, people saying, "Oh, just have one glass of Champagne to celebrate something." It's just one glass. It's like, well, yeah, but for me, one drink is, just a start. I have to be absolutely clear on that. But things like, if you go out to dinner, making sure the wine glasses are taken away before someone accidentally pours one. Just simple little tips like that come out of sharing time and space with other people in a similar situation, or who, in many cases, who've been through it. They've done it, they've achieved in stopping. And there's one in Westminster that more people should come to, and there's one I go to in Bermondsey. So, and I'm very grateful for their time.
I'd read a little bit about the process, so we can talk about it in the abstract, so you're not breaching any confidences, but it's well known, the 12-step programme. Yeah. And I read that you have to apologise, I'm paraphrasing, to people who you may have hurt during your times drinking to make amends, without revealing anything you are uncomfortable with.
I'm not on the steps yet. So I didn't think I'd make a year. So I'm in the process of considering having a sponsor and going through the forms. I honestly, when I started this, I didn't think it'd be permanent. The longer it's gone on, the better I feel, the more confident I am about, and more resolute. I have a heart condition, I have my daughter to think of. I really have to stop permanently. So I'm, I will be going through it, and I'll be honest. That's a long list. It goes back a long time.
Final question. When I looked at the programme, the 12-step programme, there's a lot about God in there. Have you had to find that higher cause?
No, I've always been Christian, so I'm not uncomfortable about the references to God that is part of AA, but it's very clear in AA that God is as you see God. So that may be different for different people, and it may just be some higher sense that doesn't necessarily have even a religious connotation. So it's whatever people feel comfortable with. And I think actually, knowing how hard it is to stop, getting yourself through that door to one of those sessions is the most important bit. And anyone thinking it's about God, it's not. It's about you, and it's about support to stop drinking. If you know you need that, and anyone can go who is committed to stopping. There are people who come who haven't yet stopped. There are people who come who are family members of others, or there's Al-Anon for carers, but people are all in a different space. There are people who have stopped and have had a drink more recently and are seeking to stop again. So it's there as a support network of people who share an addiction, who want to support each other to stop.
Thank you. It's an incredible achievement.
I'm pleased to have made a year. I hope to sustain it, if I can say the word.
Thank you for sharing all the details of that process and that journey. Well done.
Thanks.
Coming up, Labour's Preet Kaur Gill.
I remember when I was a counsellor, my kids were very young, and I was told, to go home on many occasions and look after my kids and not worry myself about certain things, and that was very misogynistic.
Coming up, senior Labour MP Clive Betts. Isn't it about who pays to save the planet?
Yes, it is, and I think we have to be very careful that we don't end up putting an undue burden on people who are on low incomes and really struggling in the current climate.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Preet Cargill, Labour MP, Labour Shadow Cabinet member. Your dad was a bus driver. Your mum worked as a seamstress. Working class to your core.
Absolutely. I mean, my parents came to the United Kingdom from Punjab in India. My mum was 8, my dad was 15, and they came because my grandfather, my great-grandfather, fought for World War I and World War II. And so, you know, their experience of coming to Britain in the 1950s was really, really quite interesting because many people lived and shared a home. And my mum talks about, you know, sharing a room. Lots of different families had different rooms, but, you know, tasting food from people from the Caribbean, for example, from people from different countries. And that's how communities really supported one another. And seeing my dad, you know, he started off in a foundry. He unionised, actually, the place that he worked and addressed these sort of issues. And, of course, very much a working class background. But they felt really proud to be here in Britain because of the opportunities it gave us. And one thing my father really valued was education because he wasn't able to complete his. And neither, you know, my mum went to school here, but she very much didn't continue that, her going to college. She went and worked, as everybody else did. And that was really important. So, you know, growing up in an environment of one of 7, and I was the eldest.
One of 7.
I know, and I really had to help my mum a lot. You can imagine I was cooking from the age of 12 and, you know, lost out on a lot of my childhood in many respects. But I really thank my mum because I'm the first generation of, you know, being a very resilient person in terms of actually dealing with a lot of issues. And I think that's really helped, especially my journey in politics.
One of 7. Where were you in the ranking?
The eldest.
So you were the eldest, which is why you had to take on some of the caring for all your siblings early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really important. You know, it was really difficult for my mum. You can just imagine nowadays, you know, I've got 2 and that feels quite challenging. Having 7, wow.
Doesn't even bear thinking about there's only 2 hands. You are the first female British Sikh MP. How does that feel? You're a trailblazer.
I mean, that's incredibly amazing to have got there. I mean, let's not forget it's taken over 100 years since women were given the right to vote. The very famous Sikh woman suffragette at the time was Sophia Dalip Singh. Her father, of course, came to this country when he was very young. She is the goddaughter of Queen Victoria. So actually, Sikh history and British history is very, very much interlinked. And so, you know, thinking back, she's an inspiration, certainly for me, growing up and reading about her history and her journey coming into politics. But it's a huge honour, you know, to be in this position. With it comes lots of expectations because whilst I'm the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Edgbaston, the Sikh community want me to deal and raise a lot of their own issues, and sometimes I have to, you know, really be clear that whilst I have a huge Sikh population in my constituency, so it's the 2nd largest faith in the constituency, so a very, very sizable. I'm also conscious that I serve a very diverse community in Edgbaston, and it's the place I grew up, actually. I went to school, my family lived there, and I know it inside out. And it's, again, so that is another honour, is to be a representative of the very seat that you grew up. So, you know, people really enjoy having those conversations or remembering what it was like in the past. And certainly, you know, this is a constituency where my father's bus garage was, where he drove the number 11 bus, which is very famous in the West Midlands. So, yeah, it's an absolute honour. But with it comes a huge amount of pressure as well, because, you know, being the only Sikh MP, you know, there is huge amounts of expectation, of course, criticisms of things that people think you're not doing as well. So I'll be really pleased in the next general election we'll have many more people standing for seats. And I think that really matters, having a voice and Parliament representing the very people it serves. It's got to, you know, it's become much more diverse in the last 10 years. We've still some way to go, though.
Have you experienced any racism in politics?
Yes, I mean, I think, you know, racism and misogyny almost feels like it's part of the job as a Member of Parliament, I have to say. You know, lots of people will, as a woman, I feel, you know, I've seen the comparisons of males doing my role, where, you know, especially Asian or white males, and actually they don't have the same sort of criticism levied at them or the remarks made at them. And so whilst people are attacking you, it can become very derogatory. It becomes about your gender, it becomes about your race and your ethnicity. And so comments like that, you've got to really learn how to pick your battles. I remember when I was a counsellor, you know, and my kids were very young, and I was told, you know, to go home on many occasions and look after my kids and not worry myself about certain things, and that was very misogynistic. And again, becoming an MP, when you're out in certain parts of my constituency, it can be very hostile. And, you know, you've got to know how to deal with these sort of issues. And for me, it's about the risks associated with some of this. Of course, online abuse is just horrific. And that's where I would say some of that racism has definitely manifested itself. And, you know, your team constantly say how many times you have to keep reporting some of these incidents, for example, and how many times do you block people. It really can become really difficult. And I think, you know, being the first female MP, I have to say, being in Parliament, sometimes that can be quite isolating in terms of that support. Who do you go and talk to? I lost my father in 2014. He was my huge amount of support. It's the reason I got into politics. And he was admired because he was a leader nationally as well as internationally. And so sometimes I think that is really quite tough as a woman, is facing so much kind of hate and criticism when you are trying to do something good. And so a lot of the things, when you look at, well, what are the issues that actually, you know, why you're getting racist comments or misogynistic comments, there are actual campaigns that actually support your community addressing inequalities. There are actually things that are positive things that you're trying to achieve and do. And that makes it much more harder, I think, when you face some of those criticisms.
You said that you had reported some of these things to the police?
So I would say, you know, racism, if you think of it as a hate crime, so many people are not reporting it because they feel that the police are too busy to actually take action and anything is going to get done. Other than reporting it and it becomes a statistic, it feels like there isn't much there in terms of support. And so it's raising it with Parliament in terms of, you know, having your social media being monitored. It's trying to do other things and be able to address it in other ways. And of course, we should be reporting it more to the police. I guess the underreporting nature of hate crimes, you know, is something that is a concern still, I would say. But I suppose for me, I just feel like, you know, do I want to really contact the police and sort of have to make a statement and go through this? Or actually, are there other mechanisms that I can do that can assure my safety and monitoring that probably going to be more effective? And so the parliamentary teams that do monitor your social media, I've spoken to them and I regularly speak to them. So that is something that we do. Of course, you report it to Twitter and other places. But of course, many of these online platforms have very high thresholds in terms of what they constitute as being, you know, clear misogynistic or whether it's violated rules. And so sometimes I have to say the response from online platforms is very, very ad hoc, and there doesn't seem to be a clear position in terms of what they will take down and not.
Coming up, more from Preet Kaur Gill after the break.
I've recently had a very direct threat, which was really worrying to me, and I reported that to the police.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
When we talk about threats, have any of them been violent threats to you?
Yeah, so I think the hardest part of the role has been having direct threats made, and you know, I've had to report that to the police. I've recently had a very direct threat, which was really worrying to me, and I reported that to the police, and the police have picked that up. But of course, what that does is when people are sort of saying to you, watch your back, watch what's going to happen to you. And
is that what happened?
That's right.
In an email?
In an email, very direct. You know, you do worry because I'm with my daughters in the constituency all of the time. I live there, so it's very different. My family live there. And I think, you know, that really puts into context the kind of job that you do. It's tough enough as it is. But then when you're faced with that, and there's very little support, actually, I would say, because once you raise that with the police, of course, they've got to go away and do an investigation. But there's no real understanding of the impact it has on you, your everyday work, the psychological impact, the kind of always looking at the back, you know, behind your shoulder. And that's why, you know, in my surgery, I have security. I have security because, you know, I know that there are individuals that do come to surgery that could possibly pose a threat. I also know, you know, with some of the hate crime issues that have existed, but also this latest direct threat, it has really worried and concerned me, actually, that as a woman, when you put yourself forward and you want to address injustices and you care about issues that, you know, affect your constituents, that you're then faced with people that think it's okay to sort of say this sort of stuff to you.
Did the person that emailed you, was that from a legitimate account with their name? So
yes.
they were happy for their name, their genuine email address, to send you an email saying watch yourself, basically.
I could not believe that this person used their place of work email to actually make that threat. And normally, most people would probably use an alias, wouldn't they? Or they'd try different ways of sort of, you know, creating a hate campaign. I mean, I've had huge amounts of hate campaigns created against me through WhatsApp group where people are just either emailing me or
WhatsApp groups?
So, you know, there was, during the 2019 election, there was quite a lot of WhatsApp groups that were sort of directing hate towards Labour MPs more so. And that became really quite nasty, where people were just emailing, you know, and of course then emailing the Labour Party saying that, you know, they wanted them to take a course of action to get rid of people like myself, Liam Byrne, others. You know, there was a lot of targeted attacks against Labour MPs, I think.
You talked about having security at your constituency surgery. Who provides that?
So Parliament provide that, and you know, this is a really important resource to have. It's something I did discuss with my team. It's something that I worry not just about my safety, of course, about theirs. You know, I don't want to restrict my surgeries. I don't want to go to an appointment-based system. I want to be able to be open and be in my community and make sure that people feel that they can have that access to myself. And so, you know, that's the reason I decided that actually it would be better to have someone that, you know, from security background, at being present, a visible presence. And of course, that gives a very clear message as well in the constituency that there is, Preet does have security. And I think that's been really important. It's given me a lot more, I would say, a sense of safety since having that. And I am really, really mindful that, that's important for my staff as well.
Final question. You are Shadow Secretary of State for International Development. You shadow a job that the government have scrapped. How do you persuade people who are hurting, who are going through a cost of living crisis, who can't afford to pay their bills, can't afford to feed their families, that actually it is still important for Britain as a country to do its bit, by which I mean give taxpayers money overseas?
I don't think anyone expected Boris Johnson to have taken over a world-leading department that gave us the reputation on the world stage in the middle of a pandemic. Nobody expected Britain to be navel-gazing and retreating from the world stage. We're very proud of our country. And one of the things that makes us so patriotic and proud is actually we care about the suffering of people around the world. And one thing I will say is that I've seen in the British public is that sense of solidarity. They care about the suffering of others. And I think that is so important. The absence of us not being there is really being felt when I speak to people across the world. Now, I will say that the appointment of Andrew Mitchell is actually a win for Labour because we have constantly been holding the government to account. It is really sad when I talk to people across the world when they say, no one's even talking about Britain anymore. Your influence is just not there in the way that it once was, when everyone looked to you for the solutions around the global issues, when you were the ones that would galvanise countries together, whether it's the food crisis, whether it's poverty, whether it's climate. Actually we need leadership.
But you've made your case very passionately, and we found out about the challenges that women have to suffer, endure as part of doing their job. Preet Kaur-Gill, thank you very much. Coming up, Clive Betts after the break.
So I sort of knew I was gay for ages, and when I came out, lots of friends said to me, well, why have you just said now? We all sort of knew you were. And oh, did you?
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Clive Betts, you have been a Sheffield MP for more than 30 years. That is a long stint. Does it feel like a long stint?
It does. And when I go into schools and tell children I've been there for 30 years, they sort of look at me a bit gone out with awe on their faces, because that's just a length of time that, of course, is longer than many of my constituents' lives. So a long time, seen a lot of change. But still really enthusiastic about doing the job.
Before you were elected to Parliament, you were leader of Sheffield City Council. Yeah. You were leader when 97 Liverpool supporters died as a result of that 1989 disaster at Sheffield's Hillsborough football ground. You were there.
I was.
That day. Can you recall your most vivid memory?
Oh, I think several at that occasion, obviously. I think the first was when one of the cameramen who I knew, done interviews with, came to me as we were just milling around, thinking about what was happening, because we didn't know. There weren't mobile phones in those days, so the amount of messaging about it coming out was limited. And he just said, I saw the police open the gates. I saw them open the gates. I saw people go through. And I thought, that's the first time I thought, what's happened? Something really dramatic's happened. And we saw people being pulled out of the crowd and lying on the grass. And you thought, what occasionally happens at football matches, people faint, they're stressed, they're crushed. And it was only later you began to realise all these people had died. And I remember a police superintendent coming to me, knew me, and said, there's over 60 people died. And you think, I've just seen that. I literally cannot believe what I've just seen. And then the enormity of it hit you. And I remember just going aside and people just breaking down crying. I mean, that's all you could do. Hopelessness, despair, tragedy had happened before our eyes. And we hadn't really recognised it while it was going on.
Police forces have very recently apologised for what they described as profound failings, which continue to blight relatives of victims of the Hillsborough disaster. Has the case now been closed, as it were?
Well, I suppose for the families who lost loved ones, it can never totally be closed. I think that's just, the reality of the situation. But in terms of the legalities, yes. South Yorkshire Police were held responsible. It wasn't just the failings on the day, it was the cover-up afterwards, which was an absolute disgrace. And that has clearly come to light and been accepted now following the various reports. And South Yorkshire Police now is a different organisation. It is now regarded as a well-performing police service. And I think it's important we get a move on from their point of view, that every one officer who is looking after my constituents in Sheffield shouldn't have the weight of history on their shoulders and be feeling, we're in an inferior organisation, because they're not now. They're in an organisation which has accepted what it did wrong, moved on, and is now, in my view, delivering a good service, albeit with the constraints of limited resources.
Thank you. They'll appreciate that, I'm sure. Now, you are chair of the Local Government Select Committee, one of these important committees in Parliament with a cross-party group of MPs which looks into how particular things are working or not, and local government is your committee's specialism. I want to talk to you about council tax, because most households are going to see an increase of 5% at a time when they're really in pain. It doesn't seem fair to me. Is there no alternative to putting up council tax if you are a council leader in these difficult times?
No, because government grant has been cut over the years, and it's been, local governments had bigger cuts to its budgets than any other part of the public sector since 2010. The most of those cuts, the largest of those cuts, has fallen on the poorest councils in the Midlands and the North. The argument is, well, they had the most grant beforehand, so they had most grant to cut. But where'd you go? Well, you see the pressures on social care in particular. And until we find an alternative way of funding social care, then it's going to fall back on council tax if government doesn't put grant up proportionately. As government grants been cut, council tax has been increased to try and replace some of it. Without it, we'd have even bigger cuts to the already massive cuts that councils have had to make in the last 12 years.
And you mentioned the North and the Midlands. One thing that will strike many people as odd. It struck me as odd when I moved from London to Nottinghamshire, where I was a Member of Parliament. My house was obviously worth significantly less in Ashfield than it is now. I've had to move back to London for work. My council tax was, I think it was close to double what I'm paying in London. You represent a northern city. Is that inequity? It's like, how can that be? Because wages are higher in London, council tax is higher in those.
It depends which part of London you're in, because it isn't the same in all parts of London.
Sure.
That's the challenge. It is a big challenge, local government finance. It's one of future government's going to have to address. But it's a really contentious issue because for every person whose tax you reduce and says, thank you, and moves on, the person whose tax you put up doesn't forgive you for the next 10 years. And local government finance has a history of bringing down prime ministers, of course, when Margaret Thatcher tried to reform it with the poll tax, and eventually it led to her downfall. So it's a very complicated and tricky issues. But at some point, we're going to have to recognise, indeed Michael Gove recognised it at committee the other day, that council tax is regressive. It actually takes a disproportionate amount of money from poorer households, and that simply isn't fair. So we're going to have to reform it, and we're going to have to look for another source of funding for social care, as they've done in Germany or Japan or other countries, where they've recognised this is something that simply can't be put on the back of a tax like council tax.
Another contentious area for many local government leaders is these low traffic neighbourhoods, climate action zones, where you've got to pay to drive through your neighbourhood. The car is essential for many people, parents, those with disabilities. You can white van man. You can think of the groups that would be particularly hardest hit, those that cannot do without their car. Is there a better way? Isn't it about who pays to save the planet?
Yes, it is. And I think we have to be very careful that we don't end up putting an undue burden on people who are on low incomes and really struggling in the current climate. People's fuel bills, their heating bills, their mortgages are all going up significantly. To put other costs on them is really difficult. But in the end, there is a wider issue about climate change. It isn't just climate change, of course. It's nitrogen dioxide, which is a pollutant, and it particularly kills children because it sinks to the ground. So we have to address both those issues properly. But I just think we've got to do more to help people through this. One, we could bring in scrappage schemes, so that people who've got older polluting cars can upgrade to a more modern car. That's something that's been around and suggested for a long time, but it needs government funding, and the government's walked away from that. And secondly, people need alternatives. If they're going to travel around, they need a good public transport system. And, London hasn't got a bad public transport system. You go to the North and Midlands, our bus services are just being cut to shreds currently. If you live in a rural area, you probably haven't got a bus or got a bus a day or something like that. Even urban areas now, routes have disappeared, or people wait 2 hours for a bus where they used to wait half an hour. That's just not acceptable, and people won't do that and get out of their car willingly. So we need that alternative. Improve public transport, help people in older polluting cars and vehicles to get new ones, and then look at how you impose restrictions as part of a package.
It's the real me, this. We've done a lot of politics, but just to get back to you personally, you live in your constituency, you live with your partner, James. You are an out gay man. When you came out, how old were you? How long ago was it? Was it a very different environment?
Early 50s. So I sort of knew I was gay for ages. And when I came out, lots of friends said to me, well, why we just said now? We all sort of knew you were. And oh, did you? And you live in a little cocoon of your own because, when I was brought up in Sheffield, people weren't out. There was hardly any gay scene. It was hardly talked about. If people talked about it, they were often quite disparaging remarks. So that was a different time. So people's understanding, people's comments, people's views of the issue of sexual equality and sexuality have changed over the years. So when I came out, it was really quite surprising. Both friends said that, and I remember two very interesting experiences, if I could say. Remember one, when James and I decided to have our civil partnership, an elderly lady, probably an Eric, just came along to me and said, "Oh, that was lovely, that photo in the paper. Hope you have a smashing time, lovely day." I just thought, wasn't that nice? It's just someone's genuine view. And I remember coming out, and I go to away football matches. And yet sometimes football fans are not always the most polite about comments they make, sometimes with the chanting. And I went to my first away game, where you tend to go with the same people after I came out. It was at Leicester, actually, went to see Sheffield Wednesday play. And fans came up to me and said, "Great to see you back. You're still the same football fan you were before." And I thought that's a change of approach. And even more remarkable, went to Brighton, and there wasn't so much you get one or two rude comments from away fans at Brighton with Sheffield Wednesday fans. And someone came up to me at half-time and said, "Oh, I've been doing some chanting which was homophobic. I suddenly realised you were there. It wasn't intended for you. It was wrong, and I've come to apologise." And I thought, life has moved on, life has changed, and that's good for it. So hopefully, in coming out and being open about it, I've helped a bit, maybe other people who are still concerned about that and still worried about it and living something which isn't their true lives.
How long were you? In turmoil's the wrong word, but how long were you struggling with, should I come out, should I not come out? Was it many years?
I suppose once I got to Parliament and people like Chris Smith were out, the first gay MP, and I knew Chris, funnily enough, because I signed Chris into the Labour Party when we were both students together, so I've known Chris for years. And so you think then, oh, if he's done it, should I done it? I think, talking to Chris, I accept that Islington and Sheffield were slightly different places in terms of where people's understanding and views were at. So, but I mean, I saw people in Angela Eagle as well, who I came into Parliament with. So you saw the people coming out, and you gradually began to think, well, maybe this is something I can do. And I tell you what, it's one of the best decisions I ever made.
That's a very happy note
to
conclude with. Clive Betts, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I'm back next Sunday at 6.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. It is going to turn colder over the next few days. The risk of some snow, particularly across the north of the UK, but more widely some frost and ice to contend with. Looking at the bigger picture, this frontal system moves south over the next 24 hours, introducing cold Arctic air across the whole of the UK from Monday into Tuesday, though the Atlantic starting to return by the end of the week. Through into the evening and overnight, a lot of cloud across the UK, some showery outbreaks of rain in places, but there are some clear spells, southeast England for a time, across Northern Ireland, Scotland, and we'll see temperatures here falling close to, if not below, freezing. Snow showers across northern Scotland and eastern Scotland, risk of ice to start Monday morning.